Hello and welcome to the Dash News podcast. This is episode 112. I'm Mark Mason and I'm joined by my fellow host and amigo, Joel Valenzuela. How's it going, Joel?
I'm doing fantastic. I apologize about the background. There's no Dash picture in the background. It's a crappy hotel picture, but hey, I'm on the road spreading the Dashy word outside of New Dashier. It's got to get to other places.
Yeah, so you're in the windy city, correct?
Yes, it's not very windy today, but it's I'm in Chicago. I was presenting to a venture capital fund about Dash. They wanted to know about it, and I got an invite from someone who works there. And so yeah, they're extremely muted in the way they responded, but I hear that's just the way they are, and I hear that they're very excited about Dash now. So that's fantastic. And I almost got a local pub to take Dash. Just walked in, talked to the owner, and he was like, "Oh, all right." So I've been working hard. Now I'm like taking the weekend off. And I mean, as much as like the weekend off as anyone in Dash Force can actually take, you know the struggle, Mark.
Absolutely. Right, Joel, before we introduce our special guest, because I really want to get onto that, there's a really important announcement to make. Can you just get that out the way just quickly so we can get into the good stuff?
Yes, in case you're not on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, other places like that, if you use my Dash wallet, don't. There's been a compromise. There's been some rumors of people getting their funds stolen, stuff like that. Just stay away from it until you kind of figure it out. Use, the official Dash mobile wallets or desktop wallets. Use hardware wallets. And this is a great time for a PSA. Don't store anything of significant value in a web wallet. Just don't. Like, don't throw like a couple $1,000s worth. No, don't even do that. Don't do, probably not even in mobile wallets for the most part. Try to keep everything in your actual hardware wallet or cold storage or whatever. Feel free to ping at Dash News, at Dash Pay News on Twitter, whatever else. Wherever else you want to reach out to us, live chat, ask if you don't know how to do this. I understand that it's challenging. When I was first living on Bitcoin stuff, I had like my 0.5 Bitcoin all in my blockchain.info web wallet. Everything I owned was in there. And then over time, I realized, oh, this isn't the most secure place. And about a year after, it was completely empty, after I wasn't using Bitcoin anymore, someone actually got into my email and tried to hack into there and take my lack of Bitcoin. So be careful. Web wallets, no good. Small amounts only, just for convenience. Hardware, wallets, cold storage. If you want to be your own bank, you better act like a bank. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joel. Right, now on to the fun and exciting stuff. For this week's podcast, we welcome special guest Dana Alibrandi, who is the Dash platform product owner from the Dash Core Group. Welcome to the podcast, Dana.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Excellent. I think the community is going to be really pleased to meet you. I found myself in a bit of an awkward position because I kind of think you might be Dashy's best kept secret, right?
Yeah, I've been hiding in the shadows purposefully.
Yeah, and
away, working.
I mean that in the kind,
Caribbean.
yeah, in the politest way possible.
There on the ship.
I think it was. I think the first time I heard your name was with the consensus event, and I think I was speaking to Jacob Barlou from Vega Wallet, and he was talking to me about the event, and he was just like, "Yeah," and I was talking to Dana about DApps and everything out from the Dash Core Group, and I was like, "Dana, who?" I'll just nod and smile and be polite. But I was like, "Dana, who?" And of course, since then, I've been talking to Liz and everything else, and oh my god. We're always talking about Dash platform, aka Dash evolution. So, we've got this. I really hope everyone's tuning in for this because you've prepared some stuff as well to help educate people about Dash platform. So hopefully we can learn firstly a bit more information about you, and then we can kind of do a bit of a deep dive into Dash platform, Dash Drive, Dash Dappy, find out what's going to be possible and what isn't from the inception, from the get-go, from the MVP, because I have a tendency to get overexcited and go probably like skip too far ahead. So anyway, let's talk about you, Dana. So how long have you been in Dash Core Group for now?
I had my year anniversary recently in May. So it's been just over a year. A great year though.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So, and you enjoying it?
Yeah, absolutely. This might be cliche, but this is my favorite job that I've ever had.
Yes, I don't think that we want people who don't think that in the ecosystem.
Right?
So you pass the test.
Yes.
Yeah. How long? I mean, like seriously, Mark, have you ever worked this hard for something you didn't love?
Man, passion is everything. You know.
Yes.
Hashtag stay
Yes.
dashy.
The
24/7.
frozen pizza
365.
diet. The frozen pizza diet, no sunlight lifestyle can only happen if you're like have the bright, shining tropical beach of dashing awesomeness coming from your computer screen all the time as you're on it. So, how long have you known about cryptocurrency, and then how long have you been kind of like into it, like trying to invest, learning more about, like kind of into the space in general? I say that, I mean, obviously because very few people start at Dash. I had like a good 3 years of Bitcoin in me before Dash came around in my world.
Yeah, I knew about Bitcoin pretty early on. I wasn't working in product management yet, but I had a lot of friends that were engineers. And one of them was living with me at the time in Los Angeles. And he started telling me about this cool digital money thing called Bitcoin. And I think at the time it was either $13 a Bitcoin or $100 a Bitcoin.
Both good times to have heard about it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, do you think we should buy some?" And I'm like, I don't know, maybe, nah. And I ended up creating a Mt. Gox account, and I can't remember if I bought any or not. I'm kind of secretly hoping that I did, and it's like lurking around on the internet somewhere. Make some, claim to, defunct Mt. Gox seeking these funds, but probably not. It probably just doesn't exist, unfortunately.
So
yeah.
So
Go
you
on.
like so your title is product owner for Dash platform, correct? So
Yes.
what does the product owner do? So you kind of like overseeing what Dash platform is, you're speaking to the developers, you're making sure like the product ticks all the boxes and does what it's meant to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I was brought on, it was explicitly for back-end product management of Evolution. And at the time, we were still refining a lot of the concepts, and we didn't actually have this concept of Dash platform. It's just that we needed to build these back-end components in order to create some of these more user-friendly wallets and other apps that we had been thinking about. And then once we realized that they were all of these components were a part of the same larger system, we ended up merging those two teams together, the Dappy team and the Drive team, and now we are the platform team. And yeah.
So how long ago exactly was it kind of discovered that you need something like platform in order to just do the basic username contactless kind of thing? Because I know late 2015 is when Evan started talking about Evolution, all these easy grandma use, all that kind of stuff. And it just seemed like people were waiting forever for Evolution to be out. And they thought, oh, it's never coming around. It's Neverlution, all this kind of stuff. And then at some point, the vision came together. It's like, okay, look, we actually realized we needed serious infrastructure to do this the right way, in a good decentralized way and everything. And so like kind of when did that end up coming to happen?
I think it's still happening. It's still been an evolving process. When I first started, we were aware that we needed usernames, and our concept of usernames was a little bit different than our new concept of usernames. We're actually revising DIP 5 and making some changes to how we approach identity and usernames. The most important thing is that we're splitting the concepts apart. But I can talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, to go back to your question, I think that as we've attempted to solve the problems that were posed in the white paper, we realized that there were a lot of things that we still needed to work out. And through that process, we ended up merging the teams and kind of got to where we are now, which is this unified concept of the platform as the back end, not just for Dash Pay, but also for anyone that wants to build on the Dash network.
Excellent. Well, I'm hoping here that you can give some clarity, because we've been like drip fed a little bit of information, but the Dash platform concept to the community is still a bit blurry. And I think from the inception of the initial launch, 1.0 launch, from MVP, we kind of want a bit of like a reality check. We want to know what's possible and what isn't. Now, in this podcast, we're going to have people watching this live via YouTube, but we're also going to have listeners as well via iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, etc., etc. So I believe you have some slides to help show us what Dash platform is, to talk us through from a simple level, because there may be new subscribers to the channel that may not know what Dash platform is. This may be their first time. So can you just like take us like right from the beginning, like to you, what is Dash platform on the most basic level?
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
Exciting times. I love slides as well. This is great. Excellent. Right. Okay. We're on you right now. A platform to rule them all. I like this. Lord of the Cryptos.
Yes. I'll just leave it like this. I'm not sure if I'll be able to control it properly if I go into presentation mode. But
okay, yes, fine.
Yeah, so I created this presentation. I gave this presentation in May at UCLA as part of like my work as the product owner to try and understand and communicate the value proposition of the platform. So I gave this presentation with that end in mind, and I had also given a couple of presentations in Asia while I was traveling around there earlier this year in Bali and Kuala Lumpur, trying to figure out if the messaging that we were using was resonating with people. But yeah, just to kick things off, Dash platform is a platform for application development. It's a platform to build blockchain applications that leverage the Dash network and blockchain. There are two major architectural components of the platform. We have DAPI, which is our decentralized API, and we have Drive, which is decentralized storage. We've referred to these as Dash DAPI or Dash Drive, but internally we just refer to them as DAPI and Drive.
Sounds like a good like a buddy cop movie or something. Dappy and Drive.
Yeah, I think so. And the two teams, like, they kind of had this, good buddy cop tension going on before they merged. And now that they've merged, they're like a beautiful partnership.
And then they walk away from explosions without even flinching.
As long as we don't like make vectors for them like the Microsoft paperclip. Do you remember that? Please don't do that.
No. Oh no.
Yeah. They're walking away from these explosions while I'm turning and staring at these explosions in awe, scared.
Excellent. So, yeah. Okay, so we've got the Dash Drive and we've got the Dash DAPI, and they're the two main components of the architecture.
Yeah. So Drive is the storage component. Drive is essentially a document-oriented database. We're using MongoDB for anyone familiar with that technology. Mm-hmm. And that will live on all of the master nodes and host application data. The first iteration of the platform, when we release for MVP, it will be most similar to a database as a service, or you could also think of it as similar to a blockchain as a service.
So when talking about Drive and storage, how much can you jam in there? Like, whenever I think about space and storage, I always reminded of like those big old physical hard drives I used to have to buy to get all my like pirated movies on and stuff, all that kind of like before Netflix stuff. And like, how much will people be able to actually store on Dash Drive realistically? Is it going to be something where at some point people can just do a general storage dApps and be like, I'm going to put the Lord of the Rings extended edition trilogy on Dash Drive just cuz? Or is it going to be one of those things that's just only for specialized uses?
Yeah, that's a good question. And based on what I've heard, that seems to be a big point of confusion or lack of clarity as to what the platform can do. So this first version of the platform will not be a Dropbox. It will not be suited for object storage. You could upload like a movie like Lord of the Rings to your Dash Drive instance, but the database is not optimized for like rich media. It's most optimized for text and structured text that you would see in like a website or something like that.
So would it be possible to give like an example from MVP, how a developer would utilize Dash Drive for their project, for their DApp?
Yeah, so they would have an application. That application might be some sort of supply chain tracking software. Maybe it tracks what's referred to as seed to sale in the marijuana industry. So at different stages of that plant, going from a grower to a distributor to a retailer, you might want to take a snapshot of that data along its journey from those different parties. And all of that data is going to be text data. So storing that in Dash Drive provides a level of security and transparency to all of the other parties that are observing that product as it's transitioning in the supply chain.
So, what kind of data is usually stored on the blockchain other than just transactions? So, for example, through opcodes, I know that there's some people who are storing like giant bits of data on, for example, the Bitcoin SV blockchain. That seems to be a big thing they're into, just right on the blockchain. So, what does Drive store that is either not optimal to put on the blockchain or is different?
Well, the whole opcode thing, that's also interesting that you brought that up. That was, it was never really intended for what it turned into, which was this sort of like catch-all, we're going to put miscellaneous data there. I actually reference an application that uses the opcode later in the presentation, and I'll actually jump to it right now, just because I think it's a really cool use case. Proof of existence. Are you familiar with this website?
No, proof of existence.
Yeah.
Are we really here? Is this like the Matrix?
No, it's not that cool. It's still cool, but it's basically a digital notary. I am proving that I own this document at a certain point of time, and all that you do is you hash your document and you post that hash to the Bitcoin blockchain in the opcode field.
Oh, so it's like copyright. So say like if I did like a painting or something, I could put it on there and prove that I did it, and it's then stamped at that time and date, and I can prove that I did that then, right?
Yes.
Or if you were the creator of Bitcoin, you could put a timestamp somewhere that would prove it.
Yeah, of course, and have the keys right, Craig right. So
I'm glad that came up. I wanted to do a subtle jab there as well. Good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have this, and one of the big differences between this and Dash Drive, and something that I think speaks to a strength of the platform, is within this POX website, you're just posting a hash, and that hash could be just like a PDF. It could be a hash of an image, or it could be a hash of anything. And within Drive and Dash platform, you would be able to create specific JSON structures that have properties that explicitly define the data that you are trying to save or capture. Might sound a little abstract, but basically if I was creating an album, I could create a data structure in Dash Drive, and that data structure has a property for title, artist, genre, composer, publisher, track list, and all of that is going to be stored in a more accessible format that is easier to verify, as opposed to just storing like a random hash of a document.
Excellent. I think one key thing to point out for listeners that are learning about Dash platform is that Joel mentioned BSV, and they've got quite large blocks on their blockchain. But for developers watching and listening, Dash Drive doesn't necessarily work on the blockchain because it utilizes the masternode network, right? So that's kind of the special source.
Yes. So we're not actually posting anything on the blockchain. Well, that's not entirely true. We are going to post a snapshot of what we refer to as like layer 2 or the platform level. We'll post a snapshot of a state transition on the blockchain. And that's kind of like a notarization of that state transition. And the state transitions themselves will be stored in IPFS, which is a super awesome technology that will live on all of the master nodes and help store and propagate state transitions to other master nodes.
Do you think that's the biggest problem for you? If you've been given this presentation to students, have they been able to understand the masternode concept? Because the Dash drive in terms of structure and Dash having the masternode network as a second layer is very unique and different to other solutions like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other projects like Ethereum, which typically have developers building things. This is very unique, right? Do you find people can understand that?
It's tough. It's definitely a challenge. When I gave this presentation at UCLA, the students were members of the blockchain club. And while they weren't super familiar with Dash, they caught on pretty quickly and they asked a ton of really great questions. But I think that's a little unusual. Most of the audiences that I've spoken to, I've had to spend a little more time on the masternode concept to like really get them to understand how platform works.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so where did we get to in the presentation? So we've been talking about the Dash drive, but
yeah, we kind of jumped around a little bit, but yeah, I can just pick up where I left off if that works for you.
Yeah, fantastic. So sort of building apps and integrate them into the Dash platform. Yeah, because I guess this is the secret sauce, right? Because we're really appealing to developers. We need developers to build stuff, right, on Dash platform.
Yes, absolutely. And Dash Core Group is going to build some reference applications. I mean, you can think of the Dash Pay wallet as a reference application of the platform. And we're also working on this other super cool concept called the Dash Platform Name Service, which is an application that will live on Dash platform that will resolve usernames into identities that are stored on the Dash blockchain. Very similar to DNS.
But is that just for identities as in like individual identities, or can that be applied to say websites as well?
I don't know. That's actually a really good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because when you say identity, obviously I'm thinking about like the usernames that we're going to be creating, because essentially it's going to be like a profile. Is that what you mean by identity, or is this like something separate?
That is what I mean. I
Okay.
mean like someone's like user profile. So they're going to have, you know, identity, their like BLS public key stored on the blockchain, and that will be associated with whatever username that they create.
So you will create a profile. You have your username. You can upload your profile picture, right? With Dana and his lovely locks of hair that I'm super jealous of. And you know, you can have a contact list as well. So you're saying developers can tap in and plug into these profiles and utilize them for their own dApps. Is that correct?
Yes. And that is something that we're looking into as kind of like a, I don't know, the next steps after MVP. Like when we're looking to move past just the basic infrastructure to get the platform to work in different areas we're looking into for growth, decentralized identity is near the top of my list. Fascinating. And I think Dash is in a really interesting position to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to be something that for the future, especially since there's so many security breaches that happen all the time, just in the payments information. Of course, like one of the stories he published on Dash News today was about a large-scale British Airways hack of customer data that included a lot of payment information. And of course, that's part of what cryptocurrency is for. You control your own private keys. No one can just take your transaction history, like your public key, and then just use it to send your funds or something. It just doesn't work that way. And part of that, also these data breaches, is thinking, you know, all the data impersonation and things like that you have. Or I know some people who are unable to get good documents to prove their existence, etc. Or they just don't like it that it's in charge of other people's purview. And so decentralized identity that you control is, I think, pretty huge.
Yep. Self-sovereign. Yeah, so we're looking into it, and there are some reasons to pursue decentralized identity that directly benefit Dash Network, Dash Platform. Specifically, it's very similar to login with Facebook. We could have some sort of like login with Dash button, and then that allows you to port your identity data into other applications on the platform more easily. It could be like an onboarding optimization for other applications that are building on the platform.
Now, are you a Keybase user?
I have a Keybase account, but I do not use it that much.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Keybase since using it, and whenever I think about Dash and identity, I always kind of am reminded of that, because in addition to just being encrypted messaging and group messaging, allowing you to sign documents and things like that with your GPG key or whatever, it's like a source of identity that now all your social media accounts can be verified by your Keybase identity. And if you lose control of one of those, you could kind of revoke that blessing, and then there you go. And so I think there's a lot of demand for something like that. If you could make Dash the best one of those, as in if you could have the Dash identity platform also include some powerful messaging and group messaging and possibly social media account verification kind of tools, I think that would be a giant driver of new users to Dash who don't necessarily need a new money yet. And then they start using this, and now they're like, wow, this is great. And it's funny because Keybase does have like the ability, I think they're integrated with like Bitcoin, Zcash, and Stellar, or some random grouping of coins. I don't know how much that gets used, but to have their own native currency into the identity platform would be pretty great.
Yeah, there are a ton of applications that I think would just make basically any use case that we talk about more user-friendly, more like usable from a UX point of view. And I don't know, it's very exciting. We're still a ways off from really implementing this in like the full vision. We're really close to implementing the base level of identities and then usernames, but being able to port your identity data to other platforms or other applications on Dash platform, still a little ways from that.
Hey, Dana, may I kindly ask if you could go back to the previous slide that you was on? I saw something of interest. Yeah, so you said you was giving this presentation to students. I guess like these are junior developers or developers in training. So one of the questions I think we're probably going to get asked by developers when we tell them about the Dash platform that the community will want answered is what's the advantage of developers building on the Dash platform? And I noticed you've got a bullet point there about programmable languages. Now, we know there are other cryptocurrency projects like EOS and Ethereum that developers can build on, but I believe they're quite restricted because you have to use specific programming languages. But what your top bullet point there says using programming languages that you already know. So can you just elaborate on that?
Yes. So the first programming language that we will provide in terms of like SDKs and client libraries is Node.js. So if you want to build an application on Dash platform, the easiest way to do so in the beginning would be using JavaScript, which is probably the most popular language at the moment. I feel like that's a safe assessment to make.
I've heard the same, yeah.
How does that differ to other cryptocurrency DApp related projects? Is this unique for Dash, or are there other projects doing this as well?
There are other projects that are providing libraries or other sorts of SDKs in JavaScript. I'm not sure exactly how many off the top of my head, but I know that they exist. But compared to something like Ethereum, it's a much simpler experience, a much simpler development experience for several reasons. We don't have smart contract functionality into Dash, so that's a key differentiator compared to Ethereum. And consequently, we don't have Solidity. You don't have to learn some sort of new scripting language. You can just use JavaScript. You'll have to become familiar with some concepts like data contracts, which I'll describe a little bit later. But
yes, I think that'd be really interesting. The smart contract, how's that different to a data contract? But yeah, if you've got that later on down the line, because that sounds quite technical.
The data contract, I don't think is that technical. I mean, hopefully not. It has like an analogy to, traditional app development that I think developers will be able to grasp relatively quickly.
Is Dash platform developer friendly though? Like if I was a developer building applications for mobile, for Android OS, is it transferable? Like, can any developer, build on this? How accessible is it going to be to developers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So besides JavaScript, our mobile teams currently are building SDKs that include all of this platform functionality and all this evolution functionality. So there will be client libraries for Java and Objective-C in addition to JavaScript. So you'll be able to build on mobile, and Dash Core Group will also be working on porting the JavaScript library into other languages. And hopefully the community will help us out with some of that as well, creating libraries for PHP, Python, other popular languages.
So an SDK, for those that don't know, is a software development kit, and that is kind of like a tool to help developers, right?
Yes, it's kind of like a library of libraries. You would take a bunch of code that might not necessarily be organized in the most optimal way for like a developer, like the path of least resistance to start working with, Dash platform, for example, and using different functions and writing code and all of that. So an SDK just bundles all of that up in a way that's very user-friendly and makes development easier.
So if I was a developer listening to this, from what you were just saying, so from the MVP, the client library is going to be in JavaScript, correct? But
Yes.
that's not the end of the story, because there's going to be other languages as it goes further down the line. Is that correct?
Yeah, there will be other languages, and we'll also have to polish that client library pretty significantly. Right now, the client library that we're using, it's just referred to as Dappy Client, and it's just a light wrapper around Dappy. And to develop on the platform, you would also need to use another library called DPP, which stands for Dash Platform Protocol. And that platform is used for validating your state transitions. I know we just introduced a new concept as well that people might not be familiar with, so we can explain that.
Yeah, not another protocol.
Yeah.
It's just weird when we say Dash platform, because when you say platform, you kind of think of like a service that you can log into, because like we're so familiar with social media networks and stuff. It's like a platform that you can see and like tap into, but like this is kind of I don't know how to describe it actually. I mean, I would hope someday there'll be like a marketplace for dApps and everything else, right? But I guess the platform itself is utilized by the dApps, is how you access the platform, right? It's kind of like an imaginary one made up of unlimited possibilities of what the developers make upon it, correct?
Yeah, and I think from a consumer point of view, it's exactly like you said, like, platform has these connotations of something that we're like logging into and interacting with through some sort of user interface. But I think there are a lot of examples from the development side where platform does mean something different. It means something that you're building on top of. One of the companies or the products that I've really looked to as kind of inspiration has been Firebase. And Firebase is a development platform primarily geared towards mobile development. And they don't offer the same products that Dash offers, but I think they do a good job explaining their product line and creating marketing material for the platform.
Interesting. Right, so I see you've got a few other things underneath that. So in terms of developers, it's very developer friendly. JavaScript, there's going to be client libraries, there's going to be an SDK to help them. I see next you've got host all of your data on the network and secure app data on Dash blockchain. Can you just elaborate on that for us, please?
Sure. So when you create your application, the application itself will not be hosted on Dash platform. And I think that's an important thing to bring up, and that's also been a point of confusion from what I've heard in the community and different comments. So the platform can't host your application. You'd have to host it on AWS, Heroku, your own server, whatever. But you definitely can use the platform to save all of your data, and it basically turns our network into a cloud that you can save your data into and then access that data using Dappy.
or DAPI. That's a term. I guess we're probably going to be coming up to that shortly, right?
Yes, yes, it is. It's the next slide. We keep sneaking into these other concepts.
Yeah. My apologies. We've just got so many questions.
No,
But
no, it's good. I mean, this is the time to go into it.
right. So the secure app data on the Dash blockchain, is that what you was kind of saying before? So we've got the identity part down, which we've previously discussed.
Mhm.
But in terms of developers and stuff as well, I guess having that app on the Dash blockchain gives them security?
It does. It secures, it goes back to that proof of existence site that I mentioned before. It's a form of notarization. You take a snapshot of your application data and you secure it on the blockchain by um, posting the hash of the state transition into like some kind of special transaction that's stored on the blockchain.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, for that reason, the use cases for the platform and for hosting your data on the platform are a little more specialized than, oh, I think this is a really cool thing and I just want to use it to host my data. I mean, your data has to be typically of a sensitive nature and also be of interest to multiple independent parties to really benefit from storing on Dash platform.
So forgive me for asking. Me and Joel always like poking holes in things, thinking
Yeah,
worst
okay.
case scenario. I'm just wondering, how's this thing going to scale? Like, because obviously when people start off, it's going to be a clean slate. But the more people that come to play, there's going to be more congestion, more traffic, more resources. How does it scale?
Yeah, so part of that would, well, I mean, there's a couple of things. Like there are optimizations that we can introduce on the platform side to make data storage more efficient, particularly sharding, which is a form of like horizontal partitioning of your database. So we're making our data redundant by storing it in multiple locations, but not as redundant as the MVP version will, where we're storing the data on every single master node.
Interesting. I
yeah.
thought Joel was going to make a sharding joke there, but for those that don't know, so instead of, as we've already learned, the masternode network is going to be facilitating the Dash drive aspect, and Dana's already mentioned that it utilizes IPFS, and instead of like hosting complete files on each masternode, the sharding like splinters it into tiny different parts, right? So you're sharing all these different files, like different tiny parts of each files, and it's all being shared. I hope that makes sense. Google sharding if you don't know. So
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
that makes sense though, to our listeners and viewers.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into the nuances of sharding, but needless to say, it would be an optimization for how we store data and the resources required of master nodes. But another way that the system will scale is, the proof of service algorithm is going to be updated to account for these extra services that the masternode owners will be, supplying to the network. And consequently, they might have to upgrade some of their software as well, or at least they'll have the option to. We're doing all of our projections for the state transition fee with like the lowest amount of resources a masternode owner would need to satisfy. So yeah, all of that is a little bit up in the air at the moment. So not sure how that's going to shake out yet.
Okay, so that's the Dash drive. So where does the Dash DAPI come in this? How does that play? What does that do?
Yeah, so DAPI is a decentralized HTTP API, and it's really cool. It lives on every single instance of the masternode network, or on every single masternode. So when you're pinging, the Dash network and you're trying to access data, you could be pinging a different masternode and getting, the same data back, depending on how quickly you're asking for data and how long it's been stored in DAPI.
Interesting. And this is like such a powerful tool for developers, correct?
It is. Yeah. I think it'll make accessing the platform much easier. So right now the API is a JSON RPC API. So similar to how you would make requests to core and retrieve data that way. Although our client library, DAPI client, is wrapping all of those JSON RPC calls in functions. So, you would have a function that's get state transitions, and it accepts some arguments. And then you would just call that somewhere in your JavaScript code, and you would be able to retrieve all of the data via that.
Excellent. So for those that are less tech savvy and not developers, the API, in simple terms, is a bit like plug and play. It allows the developers to plug in to the network and access stuff, right? And they can retrieve stuff, transfer stuff. Is that an easy way to describe it?
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you're taking it down from like this high technical realm that I've been living in for so long. An API is, I think it's very similar to a gateway. Yeah. So it's the gateway by which a developer can access another organization or platform's data and then use that data within their own application. Thinking of like a YouTube analytics app. It's accessing YouTube's analytics API to pull data from Google's treasure trove of data and then using it within their own application.
Wow. So if I wanted data or statistics from the Dash platform, I would plug into the Dash DAPI to access that data, right? And then I could create my own app and put that into charts and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and DAPI can also, query data from layer one, like the core as well. So it's not just access to the platform, it also provides access to like lower levels of the Dash network. And it can also eventually be used to replace Insight, although we don't have any immediate plans to do that in the future.
So if Joel didn't like the first iteration of the Dash Pay DApp and thought, right, I want to create my own Dash wallet, he could create a DApp and use the DAPI to utilize the Dash Pay usernames. Is that the right way of looking at it?
Absolutely.
Okay, Joel, don't get any ideas.
Yeah, the usernames will be global.
Competition inspires innovation, right, Joel?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
It's one of the cool things about the platform. Like anything that DCG does can be, redone or re-implemented by anyone else in the community that thinks that they can create a better implementation.
So am I right?
For example, the better implementation of the Dash Pay wallet will be one that makes an air horn sound every time you send. And you have to swipe 3 times or at least like this to get it to make it rain. That's a joke that comes out about like every 10th podcast or so, and I'm not going to retire it anytime soon. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dana. I want Joel's wallet.
It's all right. You guys will have to make that case to Brian Foster when he comes on board at some point.
But like, okay, so reality check. So MVP happens, right? So version 1.0 is out. Now people are going to be creating profiles because we're just going to be at like a new dawn. Later on down the line, I'm sure there'll be more possibilities to plug into, right? But from the get-go, there's only, it is what it is. So I just want to get like that realistic expectations for the community, what to expect. And for developers as well, that, want to be some of the first developers to build a DApp. What's going to be accessible to them to do? What can they do with this to inspire them?
There's still some questions that we're trying to figure out, and maybe Liz and Brian might have already answered some of these on their side, and I just haven't kept up with it. But at least in the beginning, one of the only ways to register a username will be through the Dash Pay wallet. We were talking about implementing other ways that we could, register users, maybe through some sort of like web portal or something like that. But I'm not sure where we left off in that conversation. So
okay. Oh, that's interesting. I guess that's strategy, right? And I guess that's why we're all anticipating the upcoming summary call in August, where we're going to see the team roadmaps, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking very much forward to that. Countdown to August. Come on.
Yeah, no pressure.
No, it's great. Okay, well, I guess it makes sense. You know, if DashPay is going to be the first app, of course it makes sense. That's going to be the first place to create usernames. And I'm guessing there is
Yeah.
a lot of strategy on how we're going to onboard users and maybe some secret sauce, some bells and whistles. And I guess that's yet to be revealed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, what I
absolutely.
want to know, have you figured? And this is might have been the third or fourth person I've asked this to already. Is there a method that's been determined yet to deal with username camping yet?
No, but that is something that we've talked a lot about, and not just camping, but also any sort of like malicious behavior regarding usernames. So also like inappropriately worded usernames, things like that. We've talked
Yeah,
about a
like
couple of
Flash for Dash.
Well, I mean, that
Sorry,
could be
Mark,
harmless.
crushing your
Maybe,
dreams here.
yeah, yeah.
I'll buy that for a doff. So, like, okay, guys. So I think Joel's let the cat out the bag here. So Joel's first DApp is going to kind of be like a hosting DApp where people are going to sell their DashPay usernames, right? So I just hope no one gets Stay Dashy first. But that would be a cool DApp, right? So you could create
Well, like
DashPay
domain
usernames
name
and then sell them to
camping,
people.
like domain name camping happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I did notice as soon as it didn't really happen that much with hand cash handles for Bitcoin Cash and later SV, but as soon as they came out with this Paymail thing, I just saw all kinds of tweets. I got all the best Paymail things. You know, they're here for like $10 each. You know, like people were just hustling on that right away. In fact, like I would probably, I wouldn't maybe do this because I'm not the kind of person to do that or the expertise to do that. But I could imagine someone as soon as like 3, 2, 1, go, evolution's out, hit and go on a script and just registering every imaginable common username, just running through that, just paying all the fees for it or whatever. And now you just like own any username anyone wants to have.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a scheme to register all of the big banks so that when they come crawling over to Dash eventually, extort them for all that money.
This is an interesting point, and I know it is part of creating the DashPay usernames. There is a cost involved, and that may not be clear to other people. Now, a transaction in Dash costs less than a penny, but the transaction that is involved in creating a DashPay username, that's separate from doing like a transaction. Is it as in a payment, right? So
it is a special transaction. It's classified as a special transaction.
So,
but
like cost-wise, are we talking is it like a fraction of a cent? Do we know, or
it should be very similar to like just a standard transaction because the data involved in the special transaction for registering username is still going to be relatively small. I don't know off the top of my head, but it should be negligible.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is the whole strategy that I think gets everyone excited because obviously they want their friends and family to use the app when the DashPay DApp is out, and it's like it's the onboarding process. But I guess that's more marketing strategy and everything else.
And it's not really my realm. Since I'm focused more on developers and companies.
This is the deep dive. We want to utilize and use our time as efficiently as possible with you and focus on developers and the back end and what things are and how they work and being realistic on what's going to be available from MVP.
Yeah, so another question on that. Everyone is asking, when will specifications for developers be in documentation, all that be available? And is there going to be any kind of beta that people will be able to play with before the thing is actually out?
Excellent question. There's definitely going to be documentation. I mean, we obviously have the GitHub repositories, but we're also going to create like an API reference. We'll have topic guides for different high-level aspects of the platform, working with state transitions, creating like development environments, dev nets, working with testnet, things like that. All of this will be available when we launch primarily to testnet. So testnet will kind of be the beta that we have that will let everybody test things out. And during that time, we'll be implementing new features as well to get everything ready for that mainnet release, which is the MVP 1.0.
So on this slide, it says, so Dappy, easy integration into your app through NPM. Am I right in thinking that's something to do with JavaScript?
It is. NPM is a package manager for JavaScript. And so basically you can just do like npm install Dappy client. And eventually, because we secure the rights to the Dash JavaScript package, it could just be npm install Dash. And it can be that easy to get the library installed. And then when you add it to your app, it will be const dash equals required dash.
So
For
this,
anyone listening that's a JavaScript person.
so it streamlines the process for developers.
It does, yeah. It makes it much easier. npm is a very commonly used tool for JavaScript developers. So any JavaScript developers that are listening will be very familiar with npm.
Interesting. Right. Do you think that we've missed anything out on Dappy that you want the world to know, for aspiring developers out there, but also for the Dash community excited for the big reveal?
I don't think so. Nothing really comes to mind at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'll keep an eye on the live chat as well. So if anyone that's watching this live, I'm keeping half an eye on the live chat. So do feel free to throw in some questions. And if we have time at the end, we'll do our best to get them in.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of those annoying noob questions that are mostly, I'm sure it's like every single Reddit thread or whatever. Oh, is this better than that and stuff. So first off, we do actually have a question that's kind of part of that is, why would a dApp go on Dash rather than on EOS? So let me add to that. Why would anyone want to build a dApp on Dash rather than on SV, EOS, and Ethereum? What would be the reasons why one would build that on Dash instead of those ones?
I think simplicity is part of it. Simplicity of the development experience. So the fact that we have JavaScript, the fact that we made it relatively easy, and I know that this hasn't been clearly communicated, but it will be relatively easy to get up and running, to integrate your application into the Dash network and blockchain. And then I think another big part of why you would develop on Dash is our underlying network, our masternode network, and just the relative maturity of our governance and our treasury system. Also combine that with the investment fund, and you have a way to, pitch ideas to improve the Dash network, receive funding through that investment fund, and then build on the platform and all contribute to the same ecosystem. So, I mean, in general, what you asked is the question that Liz and I in particular spend most of our time trying to answer and refine. And it's an ongoing process.
There's one piece of the puzzle that I don't understand though.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to think from the mindset of a developer. So we spoke about platform, drive, and Dappy. And if you want to build something, you really need to understand all three of those concepts. But we've had Joshua from the Dash Core group on before previously, and he did a presentation on the official Dash YouTube channel, and he was talking about schemas, which are kind of like skeletons, which is kind of like a wizard sort of thing, where basically if you want to build an app, you've got a skeleton so you can build apps much more quickly, right? Because you've got a framework to go with to speed up the process. Where does that fit in? Like, so where do the schemas and stuff come in? If I want to build a dApp, where do I go to first? Yeah,
so I'm not entirely sure what he means by schemas, because a couple of things come to mind. We previously referred to data contracts as schemas. So
yeah, I think it's kind of like a dApp wizard or something like that. But dApp schema. I think Joshua was live in the chat earlier, so he might be able to elaborate. I don't want to throw you off your game too much, but I think that's because I've digested so much evolution stuff over the years that it's all there. So okay, don't worry about that too much for now.
Well, there is another part of that which I think is definitely worth mentioning, and it's kind of similar to for all the developers in the room. It's similar to like the concept behind like Ruby on Rails or any sort of framework where you can use this framework to basically kickstart building an application. It comes with a bunch of, files and organization that will allow you to focus on, adding your business logic into the application. So we can definitely do something like that in the future. And it's something that we've talked about for our longer term roadmap, but it won't be part of MVP or anything like that.
Interesting. So Joelle asked Liz last week, your colleague.
Good old Liz.
Yeah, fantastic. Liz had very kind words to say about yourself. Joelle asked Liz, what is the killer DApp from her point of view? And she mentioned supply chains in the medical sense, in the medical field. And you've mentioned supply chains earlier on in the podcast. But what would be your killer DApp idea? Myself and Joelle, we're always talking about social networks and everything else, but you must have some ideas. To you, what is the killer DApp?
It's a good question, a tough question. The area that I keep coming back to is supply chain. I love supply chain, but to get even more specific, I keep coming back to the marijuana industry. I think as a whole, the marijuana industry would really benefit from something like Dash Platform, because the marijuana industry has an issue with supply chain, which could be solved through Dash Platform. It has an issue with big banks not accepting their funds. So that could be solved through the use of cryptocurrency. It has issues with security of being like largely cash-based businesses, transporting large amounts of cash around. It's a risk. And there's one other thing.
So you're not just talking about from a monetary transaction perspective, you're talking about tracking as well, kind of like from seed to store.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, I like marijuana, not just because I think there are big benefits for the platform, but because holistically, I think the industry would benefit from what Dash as like a network could provide. Yeah, through the currency, through the platform. And the platform would provide transparency that would be very useful, I'm sure, in these marijuana companies remaining compliant with federal and state authorities. These federal and state authorities could just check the blockchain and keep track of inventory, keep track of like tax payments, things like that.
Okay. I just want to intervene quick. Joshua from Dash Core Group has mentioned in the live chat. So for the sake of those that are listening to this podcast and don't have the luxury of seeing the live chat, I'll just read out Joshua's comment with regard to my comments earlier to the schema.
Oh,
and
perfect.
Joshua says a DApp has two parts: a format for the data it will store, which I had called a schema earlier, and some kind of code that the clients will run. That uses DAPI, decentralized API, and stores, retrieves, manipulates app data. So hopefully for you developers out there, you can understand that, and that makes a lot more sense now. Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. This brings us to data contracts.
Excellent.
The concept that he was describing is what we refer to now as a data contract. And for anyone that doesn't have the visual, a data contract is a formal agreement between a service like Dash Platform and a client, which would be some sort of application. And that agreement describes the data to be exchanged between Dash Platform and the application. So if you're a developer and you're familiar with the concept of the database schema, it is very, very similar to that. Except we have a non-relational document-oriented database instead of a object relational database.
Can you give an example of a DApp using this? Because I'm thinking a formal agreement between a service and a client application that describes the data to be exchanged. So let's use Liz's example of a supply chain for like medical records, holding your medical history. How would the data contract work in that? I'm just trying to visualize it so it's easy for people to understand.
Yeah, so a data contract is required of every single application that integrates or builds on top of Dash Platform. It's like a base level requirement. And if we were looking at like a health record, maybe on like a specific health record, it would have properties. And maybe one of those properties is doctor.
Right. So if Joel had a long list of things wrong with him, I'm not saying that out there. But if he did, but if he wanted, and that was his medical record, but he only wanted people to see the top 5 to be public and the rest to be private, would that be the data contract? Like we could just say, okay, because he's given his consent to his identity in the medical record.
Not exactly. I mean, that's another problem that we're aware of that we have to solve, which it's not really much of a problem. It's just that, state transitions won't be encrypted by default, at least in the beginning. So Dash platform would not be a great choice for a healthcare record because other people could theoretically see that data. So it would be unencrypted living on a master node. Although the application creator has the choice to encrypt their state transition or encrypt their data on their side. But going back to your question, it wouldn't really be about choosing privacy. It's about validating the structure of your data in the contents of that data. So validating the structure of your state transition.
Right, so it's setting the boundaries of what can be done.
I actually wrote down like a relatively simple way to illustrate this. So let's say we have a data contract for a user profile. And in that user profile, you have a property of username. And you want to define that property as being required. So every time you want to make an update to your profile, you have to include your username. And if I try to submit a state transition without a username property, it would be invalid and that state transition would not be accepted because it doesn't conform to the rules of the data contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. You're basically setting the parameters, what can be done.
Yeah, and I would also add like, the username has to be a string. So if I typed in a bunch of numbers, then that state transition would not be valid according to the rules of the data contract.
This is why I think I'm really happy that you're breaking this down in simple terms, because for those that are less tech savvy, they see contract and they think that's a written kind of agreement, but like a data contract is very, different to wrap your head around. And, back once again, earlier on the podcast, other people that are familiar with EOS, Ethereum, and other projects have heard smart contracts. That goes, it's kind of like a buzzword. So you say like smart contracts are different to data contracts. So those that just heard the name smart contracts, how is a smart contract different from a data contract?
Yeah, so a smart contract is really like a self-executing piece of code. It's like a script, and that script will execute once certain conditions are met or whatever is written in the smart contract. A data contract is not a script. It doesn't execute. It's not code in that sense. It's just a data structure that describes what your data looks like. And we need to tell the Dash network, we need to tell Dash platform what your application's data will look like. So Dash network will validate any information that you're sending into the network.
It's like setting rules, right?
It is. Yeah, exactly. It's about setting rules. And a smart contract is about, executing.
Excellent. Joel, data contracts, excited?
Yes, absolutely. Now, here's a part I like to bring it back to like the idiot's perspective, because partially because the lowest common denominator always makes it easiest for everyone to understand. Also because I get to pretend like I'm not an idiot, but just taking on their side, but maybe I am. And more importantly, just like the hype-driven cycle of everything makes it seem like everyone's kind of after that, the great, like the Ethereum killer, or the this, that, or it's just going to make everything. You can put everything on a blockchain. You can put your whole family on the blockchain, put the universe on a block, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So some dumb questions. So first off, when I'm just thinking about applications and things that I would like to be run in a better way, let's just take the concept I go back to time and time again, which is Dashbook, Dash version of Facebook. So first off, could you make a replication of the relative replication of the Facebook experience as a Dash Dap?
Yes, you could.
And
You
would that be
probably,
a good use of it, or would it be a little shoehorned in or something?
I don't know. I think it depends on what your intention is. I think something that's really interesting about Dash platform and really any blockchain application platform is the opportunity for new like ways to monetize. So you could create like a Dash book, and the whole point of it is to like be ad free. Like you're not selling anyone's data. That's not how you're making money. There are no advertisements. In exchange, people are paying to post their data. So that I think that requires like a paradigm shift in how people think about using consumer apps, because typically people think of them as being free. But in a dashbook scenario, uh, the user would be paying to make profile changes, essentially.
Yeah, so essentially it would be like Facebook. It works great, everything. No advertisement. They don't farm your data. It's all secure. However, you just kind of pay some like microtransactions to actually do posts. So if you're someone who just does a post every year or so, you basically pay like 5 cents a year, if that. But if you're one of those people who just has a constant insecurity and need for projection to the whole world, you might have, that might be a costly habit a little bit. Maybe not super
Yeah,
costly,
but then
but
those economics are going to, moderate that behavior.
yeah, of course. So when you actually do that, first off, thinking of like a marketing kind of standpoint, if you can market it as the Facebook that won't advertise to you or sell your data.
The data you own.
Yes.
Own your
Now,
data.
whenever you think about, on blockchain, Dash, decentralized, all this kind of stuff, the instant thing that goes into an idiot like me's mind is, oh, it's all decentralized. It's just like it's all everything about it. You just like run this. Someone makes some DApp and it's just all like decentralized, censorship resistant, and all that kind of stuff. It seems like an oversimplification even to my lizard brain. So tell me, what about something like that would be centralized and what would be decentralized? As in, you know how Facebook goes down
Uh-huh.
sometimes. First off, would the be if it's running on Dash, then it would never really go down, right?
No, that's not true.
There we go. See?
Yes, it still could go down, but if it goes down, you can, rest assured, you can sleep easy that your data is safe. Arguably the most important aspect of your application is safe. And the reason that, Dashbook could go down doesn't have to do with the Dash network. It has to do with the infrastructure you're using to host your application. Like
The
maybe
client
you're
side,
hosting
right?
your application on Heroku and then that goes down.
Yeah. I think Joshua just made a really good point in the chat. He says also with smart contracts, the computation is done by the network, and with data contracts, computation happens in the client,
Yeah,
which
that
means
is
Dash is a lot more streamlined experience as opposed to smart contracts, for example, run on Ethereum.
Mhm.
There's a lot of bandwidth traffic, right? And there's a lot of
Yep.
extra resources computating that. So this is a distinct advantage. But also as well, my understanding, Dana, from what you're saying there, with this Dashbook example, if I create the resources to set that up, even from on the client side, as you say, it taps in to taps into Dash to work and function via the DAPI data contract, etc. But isn't that a distinct advantage that I can set up infrastructure really quickly as a developer, although it has to work with the Dash platform and plug into that, because doesn't that enable more flexibility and options in what you can build and create?
I believe so. And I think it's also like a move away from kind of this maximalist position that everything has to be decentralized and everything has to be, on the network, by taking some aspects of, that your application's architecture off the network, particularly hosting and like what Joshua mentioned with computation. Like it makes the experience a lot easier and more performant. Yes. Also, we avoid concepts like gas. where you kind of have to like guess how much gas you need to, execute the smart contract. All of that is avoided.
Guessthegas.com.
Yeah.
And if someone hasn't reserved that username, that domain name, they probably should. So now talk about censorship resistant.
Sorry, Joel. So you said you don't
problem.
accept things like guess. So are you manually approving this? I thought this was going to kind of be like automated, decentralized. So are you pre-approving what dApps go on and whatnot? How does that work?
Definitely not. There's not a concept of gas, but we do have a concept of a credit. And a credit will be used to pay for a state transition. So like Dash would be behind the scenes converted into a credit. And then that credit would be used to pay for the state transition. That's actually one aspect of the design that is very much up in the air.
Tokens.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I mean, we're definitely not centralizing and gatekeeping what applications can be.
So, for example, if Joel made the next Clash of Clans, that's the mobile phone game, right? He made the next Clash of Clans, but it's for Dash. Clash of Dash, right? And it's a mobile game, and so he's hosting the solution on his side, but he plugs that into the network, and then all of a sudden he wants to make his own tokens to trade as currency in the game. But like the gamer profiles are utilizing Dash Pay usernames. So that would be a no-go, right? That's a taboo thing to do.
Like he wouldn't be able to create a token using Dash, or like he wouldn't be able to create like an ERC20 token on Dash or something like that. This concept of the credit would be completely abstracted away from users. Like they wouldn't be able to store credits or be able to manipulate them in any way. I can't remember the exact reasoning why we had to create the concept of the credit, but it's used to facilitate the magic behind the scenes. We'd have to bring in like Ivan Shumkov or one of the other platform developers to like adequately explain it.
Okay, Joel, sorry, I cut you off before.
Yeah. So say I'm going back to the Dash book thing. Say I am Zuckerberg or some other bastard like that, and I realize that something like this threatens my game. So what I do is I, as the founder of Facebook, decides to make Dashbook. What kinds of shenanigans can I still play? So for example, can I still arbitrarily modify conditions and posts? Can I censor content still? Can I still farm data?
Guess it depends on the application itself, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, especially about the farming data part, like the application code, which we wouldn't necessarily see. That might, post the data in Drive, but then it could also post it somewhere else, and we wouldn't know that. I mean, a way around that would be if the code for the application was open sourced on GitHub, and people could, see for themselves what was happening. But yeah, I mean, Facebook could probably do some sketchy stuff and still create their version of Dashbook.
But the advantage would be that even though the person creating the DApp, so to speak, is in control, and that it's dependent on them to maintain it and make sure it's up and running, the profiles themselves with the Dash Pay usernames, and I'm guessing that the content you would use, you would actually own it, as opposed to on Facebook, the photos and stuff that you upload aren't yours. Is that correct?
Yeah, you would own that data.
So that's a big advantage, right?
Yes.
In terms of self-ownership.
Definitely.
Now, imagine, so one could imagine if there's like Dashbook and it seems to work great, etc., but there's this big evil data mining Zuckerberg behind it. And that's no good. But then someone points out, hey, it's not open source. We can't see the code. We want to see the code to make sure you're not up to this stuff. And they say, well, you don't want to do it. Someone else can make Duffbook. That's just like Dashbook, but like completely open source. And people use that one because they can actually trust that nothing crazy is going on. And it's just much easier than just launching a whole separate social network on through more traditional means, right?
Yeah, we also have long-term plans to add CDN, content delivery network. So you would be able to host rich media like movies, things like that, if you wanted to. But you would also be able to host application files. If you were able to host application files, then your app would be decentralized in like a complete sense.
Yeah, so I remember you saying that Drive mostly hosts text data.
Yeah,
Now I
structured.
saw, yeah, so I saw in some early, some like mock-ups of the DashPay wallet, people creating their username and like attaching a profile picture to that. So first off, is that still planned for MVP? And then if so, where's that picture stored?
Yeah, we've had a ton of conversations about this exact topic for the reasons that we just mentioned about how Drive is not best suited for pictures. I mean, depending on the size of the pictures. So, I mean, there are a couple of ways that we could approach it. We could restrict the size of pictures, or we could just host pictures somewhere else. So you have like a Dash profile, and your data contract says like, I have an image property, and that image property is like a string. It's a URL that points to an image being stored on like an AWS server. I'm not sure what approach the DashPay team is taking, but it's definitely something that's been talked about a lot.
Interesting. So for all we know, our evil man Zuckerberg is the one controlling the picture server. So even though even though everyone's profiles and everything, usernames are all stored on Dash Drive, all completely decentralized, um, Mr. Evil Zuckerberg holds your pictures, your profile pictures hostage, and just says, "Hey, Mark, you better pay up, or I'm going to switch your picture out for one of Fluffy Pony, and no one will know any better."
Yeah, I mean, some malicious actor could own like a picture server and then say like, hey, upload all of your profile pictures here. It's nice and easy. And then he's doing some sort of malicious, evil data mining thing with them. But there are other alternatives as well. I mean, there's something like Gravatar, which is like a pretty well-known like profile picture hosting service. And you could also like use an image from your mobile device potentially. Although last time I spoke with the DashPay team, there were issues with that approach.
What's
Yeah,
this
so
chart on the next slide? Because I've just noticed, I think we've nearly been going for like an hour and 20 minutes, and I've still got so many questions, and I see you've still got quite a few slides. So,
yeah, this was an illustration of like a typical database schema that I was using to make an analogy to what a data contract is. So your data contracts would, I mean, if we had like the equivalent in Dash platform, you'd have a contract for albums, and then that album would have like an ID property that's an integer, would have an album name property that is, I guess, characters, and then all these other properties. And then we would use that data contract to just validate any new albums that we're adding to Drive, or if we're updating any existing albums.
okay, so that's all about properties.
Yeah. And same thing applies to genre and artists. Here is a topic that we've mentioned a couple of times, but I don't think we've discussed.
So Jason, well, we were talking about the schema in that state transitions. Okay, yeah, elaborate on that quick for us, please.
Yeah, so a state transition is a JSON formatted data structure, and it contains a change in your application's state. So state, I'm trying to think of how to explain this to people that aren't developers or necessarily technical, which is why I actually have these illustrations on the next slide. I'll move to that in a second.
So you have different states. So like enabled, disabled, pre-enabled, or what would that mean in developer speak?
I think state in the way that we're referring to, it's a little more broad than like enabled versus disabled. It's, the current state of your application's data. I don't know. I kind of want to say it's similar to like when the president gives the State of the Union address. Like here's the condition of our country. It's similar in concept to that. Actually, a picture I think would help illustrate this a little bit better.
Yes, please.
All right. So here is an example of state transition. I was using this to explain to the students at UCLA how a state transition works. So if we look at the image on the left, here is my profile in SoundCloud. And this is the current state of my profile. I'm listening to a specific song. I'm halfway through that song. I have a certain profile picture. And yeah. So then I make some changes to my profile in SoundCloud. And as a result, I undergo a state transition. And now the state of my application has changed. I have a new profile picture. I have a new song that I'm listening to. And yeah. So basically, in terms of Dash platform, all of that would be captured in this JSON formatted data structure I described above, all of these changes. And then that's what we would save and submit to Dash platform.
And yeah, and that state transitions just for your profile because you're the one making that change, right? So it's not like a global state transition. It's on an individual user thing in this example.
Yeah, in this example, like if I was making a state transition, it would just be for my experience of whatever app I'm using. I wouldn't be able to make a state transition that changes like the banner of the app or changes like the SoundCloud logo or something like that. And all of that would be encompassed in the data contract. Like the data contract would prevent me from making changes to the application that I don't have permission to change.
That seems pretty straightforward. Makes sense. It's almost like updating, like changing. Yeah, it makes sense. Changing the state. It's a transition into something new. I forgive me for asking, but I see on the other slide you've got some Pokemon.
Yeah. So we're jumping around in the presentation, and when I originally created this, I had a flow, and I wanted to create an example that wasn't like tech related. So I use these wonderful Pokemon, Pikachu and Raichu, to explain the state transition. So Pikachu, in his unevolved state, is this yellow electric rat. But when he is exposed to a thunderstone, he undergoes a state transition and is now a slightly more powerful electric rat, Raichu.
So
Right.
what do you reckon happens if Mark gets in contact with the Dash platform? Does he turn from Stay Dashy to Stay Bozak?
Wow.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun.
It's next level. Turn into the incredible Stay Dashy. Yeah, I think that's good. So you've been giving this presentation. You mentioned UCLA and Vietnam and somewhere else.
I gave it in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Oh, Malaysia. Okay.
And I also gave a presentation in Bali, Indonesia.
Okay. And so when you spoke about state transition and showed this to them, I guess to them, if they're like up and coming developers, this is a pretty easy concept for them to understand.
Yeah, the presentation I gave in Bali was geared toward up and coming developers. It was at a coding bootcamp. And the presentation I gave in Kuala Lumpur was directed more toward like product management, people aspiring product managers. And I don't think that they grasped the concept as well as the developers did, which is why I introduced the Pokemon, because yeah, Pikachu is one of the more lovable Pokemon, I think. Easier to grasp.
Okay.
Yeah, Raichu might be evolved, but it looks a little funky to me.
Yeah.
Right. I think me and Joel probably took up too much of your time asking questions earlier on out of excitement. I see you've got quite a few slides left. What are the main takeaways remaining that you really want to put across and you want the community to understand?
Excellent question. Let's see.
You've got lots of interesting pictures I can see on upcoming slides. that workflow there? What's that?
Yeah. I mean, this is an image I actually stole from a different.
Is this Facebook or Dashbook in the making?
No. This is actually related to this previous slide, a blockchain land registry. So I went through various use cases that could translate well to the platform. And I think one of the high-level use cases that I really like for the platform is record keeping of all kinds. So like creating a land registry on like a blockchain network would make that data much more robust. And then I provided this example of the big earthquake that hit Haiti in 2010. And after that happened, the centralized server containing the land registry titles was destroyed. And then when they were able to start rebuilding, there were a lot of people arguing over who owned what land, and there was no more data saying who owned a certain piece of land. So blockchain land registry would solve that problem.
Interesting. So any form of record keeping, Dash platform is your bag, baby.
Yeah, I really like Dash platform as a way, as like a record keeping service in general.
Well, Dana, I've got to say, I'm keeping half an eye on the live chat, and I've seen some comments being made, and they're loving it. They're actually saying, how can we make this presentation public and available on YouTube? And I guess that kind of ties into what some of the Masternode community kind of gave me feedback to ask you in this podcast, because how are we going to engage with developers? Joel mentioned resources and documentations earlier. Hackathons, events, meetups. You're the product owner, right, for Dash platform. How are you going to get this message out there? Like, how are we going to get developers building on Dash platform?
Yeah. So we've talked about a ton of different ways to do that. I mean, we're definitely going to have documentation, the kind that you would expect. So like I mentioned before, like a reference guide, topic guides, things like that. We're also talking about creating developer hubs in strategic cities, primarily in like the southern United States and in like a couple of key areas in Latin America. So like Mexico City, potentially Miami, Los Angeles. And the reason that we would be doing that is to like help encourage like US-Mexico remittances and creating remittance applications using Dash platform. Hackathons we've definitely discussed. And yeah, I mean, to answer your question, we've internally discussed all of those things. And we're at the stage where we're ready to start like executing and doing the actual organizing. And I think that during the summary call, the quarterly call, that will be another time to follow up on some of these things.
Are there going to be like videos and stuff shared? We saw a recent like marketing proposal go through and say there's going to be some upcoming videos. I don't know if that's to promote the Dash platform itself or whether they're steered towards developers, or is that yet to be announced? Is that
I'm pretty sure that video proposal is not for Dash platform.
Okay.
Although we have talked about creating educational content. I know, right?
Well, I guess if it's to onboard users, then the focus should be the Dash Pay Dap, right? So yeah, that would kind of make sense. So you've done this presentation to kind of hone the message. So you're going to still be going out presenting at conferences, meetups, universities?
Yeah, definitely. I just have to reach out, make contact, figure out like the different organizations that I think would find this interesting, or different audiences that would find this interesting. I was in Prague recently, and they have like a pretty decent little crypto community there. A lot of businesses accepting crypto, none of which accepted Dash, which hurt my feelings. So areas like that. Yeah, I need to go back to the drawing board with Liz and the marketing team at DCG and spend some time strategizing.
What about hackathons? That's the buzzword. We've seen lots of other cryptocurrency projects utilize hackathons, and of course it incentivizes developers to come along and build something because they can win prizes. And also typically it's to fix solutions that the community actually want to use, right? So that must be something of interest to you.
Yes, this was actually my ulterior motive. You caught me. You found me out for going to UCLA specifically. I live very close to the campus, but they also have like a good computer science department, and there is a pretty sizable tech scene in Los Angeles, anyways. So going there and laying down the groundwork and meeting with the blockchain organization was the first step into organizing a hackathon there. Although we'll also have hackathons in other places, hopefully, and introduce users to it. Something that we've discussed is potentially making network proposal for funds to use as a reward for the hackathon. Again, nothing that we've like made any hard decisions on, just kind of brainstorming ideas.
So could the community put up bounties? Someone in the chat said you should call them dashathons, not hackathons. But like, could the community actually just put maybe some pain points or things they want? So for example, Joel wants Dashbook, so he could put that up there and we could put a bounty. If someone else has got another idea for a DApp that they want to see, we can put them up there and then put the bounties to there to attract the developers and the talent to build on it. And would that be, I mean, I've never been to a hackathon before, so I'm assuming from what I've seen on videos, you get different teams and they're working to different goals. Normally it's kind of like timed, right?
Yeah, there's a time constraint, and there could also be like a theme. Like you have to, well, I mean, the theme would, at our Dashathon would probably be Dash. But maybe, you know, a more narrow theme would be payments, since we are digital cash.
And you've got to have like Dash developers there with the know-how, and I guess they walk around and they give help if
yeah,
needed,
they would assist
and advice
people,
and pointers.
because there would have to be like an educational component. And I mean, some of that education is on the developer teams. Like they will read through our documentation and try and learn as much as possible. But having our own developers there, whether they're DCG members or just people in the community that are knowledgeable, would be tremendously valuable.
Wow, surprised me. I'm actually quite excited. So you could have a day at UCLA where you're teaching people all the tech stuff and how it works in the background, and then the following day, the Dashathon, where they can win all these prizes and compete. And of course, we can utilize the treasury to really maximize that. And that's our secret sauce that we can do that other projects cannot in the same category, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this comes back to our treasury and like our proposal system. Like we have like the resources as a community that I think a lot of other projects don't necessarily have, and the passion. So, I mean, we can create these, you know, bounties, or like other members of the community can get involved and just spread the word.
Yeah, well, Joel actually does his own Dash meetup. And I'm sure many other people hosting meetups around the world about Dash. I'm guessing occasionally they get developers turning up, and it would be very useful for Joel to have resources, documentation, tutorial Dap guides that he can pass on to people that are of interest, so we can maximize it. So we don't have to rely on you so much on a centralized point, but we can really decentralize and like a CDN network, right? CDN.
I mean, my goal is to make my job redundant. Like if I can't be fired, then I'm not doing my job well enough.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting point of view. So like, is there anything that we're missing out? Like meetups, obviously documentation, resources, like developer conferences. We've seen Ethereum do their own like DevCon.
Yeah, developer conference is, again, like we've talked about it. We don't have any plans to do something like that in the near future, just because it's a big endeavor and we don't have any users yet. I think the plan is to start smaller and focus on meetups, focus on like targeted hackathons in certain areas where like there are a lot of Dash representation via like big meetups and things like that. And once we grow use of the platform to a certain level, we would explore something like a developer conference.
So what's the downside of having a developer conference almost instantly after the platform's available? My kind of thinking is if you don't have any users, that's the best way to get users, especially say, hey, new kid on the block, all this awesome stuff. You're tired of insert problem that happens wherever they're developing. come on in, learn about this revolutionary new thing. You get tons of people, a lot of media. They show up. They just have questions. And then in like the months following the conference, there's just all kinds of buzz about it, and more people, wait, I've heard all people talk about, I didn't go to this, but where can I learn more? And then people start getting in, and then you have tons of users.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So my thoughts on why it wouldn't be the best course of action are definitely like my individual thoughts. But I think that it would be expensive to host in the beginning. I think that and this is me as well, like I have a lot of ideas about how Dash platform could be valuable, but once it gets into the hands of real people, that might change and people can come up with new concepts. And I think it would be easier to explore those ideas and to iterate on our core value proposition in smaller groups, in smaller like hackathon meetups. And then once we have a little bit more of a solid foundation and idea of what the platform is and what it can offer people, then we have like a big, giant conference.
So is there a plan so far to identify all the developer talent that could possibly lead hackathons in little smaller conferences like this ahead of time, and then basically plan one in almost every major city possible instantly? As in not a big old splashy conference, but definitely starting out where it's not like this takes years for people to even figure out with any kind of critical mass that this even exists.
Yeah, so outside of DCG, we haven't really identified anyone, although one of the things that we are doing as part of launching are identifying launch partners. So we're speaking to a couple of companies now, educating them about what the platform is and what it can do for them. Then hopefully going to get some more of a firm commitment to develop on the platform before we launch. But to go back to your original question, we need to recruit people outside of DCG. And I think the best way to do that is to have conversations like this, make this presentation like public, give more talks, and just educate as many people as possible about what the platform is before we release.
So what should we do? So developers that have seen this and been inspired, and for the community itself, is the key takeaway from this is if you want to learn more, you've got to watch the summary call in August, where there'll be the team roadmaps, including the Dash platform team roadmap, right?
Yes.
And that will give us, I don't know, like time dates, but obviously milestones and a guideline of things to come. And I'm guessing the strategy on how this is going to launch and what we're going to do is probably going to lead to a bigger debate.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the strategy component. I mean, we definitely are talking about strategy and trying to figure out the best way to roll it out. And that goes back to the launch partners that I mentioned before. The call will definitely have the roadmaps. It'll definitely have more concrete timelines, like when we're planning to release to testnet and mainnet and things like that. Yeah. So I think that's what you can expect from the quarterly call.
All right. That seems to be the big takeaway there is you got all the teasers, everything else, quarterly call. When's that again?
Ooh, good question. August 5th, 6th?
Yeah, I don't think a hardline date's been given yet.
Yeah,
All I know is
early August.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mark? We wrap this thing up?
yeah, like the time is absolutely flown by. When you're dashing, you're having fun, time flies, right? I knew this was going to happen, and I think I could easily talk to Dana for another 2 hours, easily.
Of course. And we would. Usually Brian's the one to keep us in check with the time. Our original podcast plans were like, let's keep it within an hour. And recently it's just been like, all right, it's going to be an hour and a half. And so when it starts getting past that, I start being like, I hear some people in the live chat sleeping or just like nodding off. They had a drink for lunch. They're like, they can't, their attention span's gone. So yes,
it happens.
It's getting close to my bedtime now in my time zone.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, Dana, may I ask one thing of you? We've tried to address Dash platform, Dappy, the drive in simple terms and do a little bit of a deep dive to help aspiring developers understand like what it is and what they can expect. if there are questions that people watch this podcast after it's out being out live and they put them in the comments below, in the next few days, can you come back to the video and perhaps try and answer some of those comments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I also wanted to share my email address in case anyone watching had more questions. They wanted to like ask me if they wanted to get clarification on something. I definitely want to open the feedback channels more between like myself and the product organization and DCG in general and the rest of the community.
What kind of feedback do you want? I mean, people can send you like DAP ideas. You're going to get a million emails from Joel now about like Dashboard. You know that, right?
Well, I can't hide in the shadows anymore. I mean, I went so long and no one knew who I was. And
we've outed you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I knew it would happen after I made that Dash platform.
Well, excellent. And I actually look forward to your comments and stuff as well, because we are a community channel. So yeah, and if you are an aspiring developer, and even if you're new to Dash, and if you want more insight into some of the topics that we've discussed, you felt like we didn't do a good job or felt we skipped over something, make it known. Like, it's our job to help inform you. So please do that. I know Joel reads the comments religiously, right, Joel?
Sometimes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dana, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We should do it again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I've still got so many questions to ask you. We might have to have a part 2, I think. Or a future interview with Joel, maybe. If the community submits loads of questions, we may just have to do a sit-down interview of you and just bang out the questions and put timestamps up.
Yes.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm available. I'm here for you guys.
Fantastic. So email-wise, I'm guessing, is that the dash.org one that I've been using?
Yes.
Okay, I will try and make a mental note, and I'll put that in the video description so people can see that. You've opened up Pandora's box now.
I know, I'm a little scared
now. Bad move.
That's
but
fine. It can't be worse than my normal, my personal Gmail. So
it's okay. There's only going to be so many Flash for Dash requests in there.
There's no bad idea.
Fantastic.
Right.
Give them all.
Okay, Joel, do you want to take us out?
Yes. So if you liked anything you saw here, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe on YouTube. And for those audio-only people, I see you out there. I mean, I hear you, whatever. Make sure you go and subscribe to the audio-only version of this, which comes out tomorrow. It gets put out on the post on dashnews.org that has iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever else you like to listen to stuff. It's all there. Make sure to get in on that. And now it's time for the after party, which I sadly won't be able to attend. But if you go to staydashy.com, let's see if Mark's timing's okay. Oh, perfect. Staydashy.com. It's in the live chat. It gets you into the Dash Talk Discord. Fantastic, friendly place. And you just start asking around, where's the after party? And it's just like this, a nice casual conversation between friends, except perhaps a dozen or more friends, more casual, and for tons of time until everyone kind of falls asleep. So if you just want to hang out and get some in-depth talk into anything Dashy, that's how you do it.
I'm going to be there. What's not to like, people? So there you go. So look, I hope you found this to be informative. If you're watching this on YouTube, please press that like button, smash the dash, and don't forget to share and subscribe. And also, by the subscription button, you can hit the notification bell to be alerted about future Dash video content. What's not to love? So it's Friday night, people, where I am. That was episode 112. Amazing times. Dash platform, so close. So looking forward to that. Some upcoming summary call in August. It's all to play for. Anyway, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Stay positive. Stay humble. But most importantly, stay dashy.
Woohoo!
Have a good weekend, everyone.